You've arrived at CozySideAudio, where dreams begin with a story. Whether you're studying, journaling, or just chilling, this one's for you. If you vibe with this kind of content, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe for more.
CozySideAudio presents The Cursed Road, Chapter 1. The rain had been falling for hours, hammering down in wide, hard sheets that turned the blacktop into a mirror. A freight truck crawled up the grade, wipers squealing, engine grumbling low in protest. The driver's name was Ellis Ward. 30 years on the road, and he knew every dip and bend of I-44, like old scars on his hands. But this stretch, the one past marker 237, where the asphalt curved through a hollow of dark trees, he always took it slow. He didn't remember when he had first heard the stories. Maybe in Oklahoma, parked outside a Waffle House, two drivers swapping tales over burnt coffee. Maybe in Missouri, in a diner that smelled like rain and diesel. A man with wet boots whispering, "Don't stop," between 236 and 240. The locals called it the Cursed Road. Ellis thought it was nonsense until the night his radio went quiet. It was July then. Heat lightning had been flickering behind the clouds all day, the air swollen with the smell of ozone. He'd turned up the CB just to break the silence, listening to the low, familiar chatter of other truckers cutting through the storm. Then the line popped, one clean burst of static, and everything died. The dash lights flickered, headlights dimmed, then surged again like they'd been dunked underwater. He slapped the steering wheel, muttering, "Goddamn alternator." But when he looked up, he saw something on the shoulder. A kid. Just standing there, barefoot, soaked through, head tilted, like he was listening to the rain. Ellis slowed, heart hammering. The boy turned his head. Then lightning ripped across the sky, and for a second the road lit up white, and the boy was gone. He never told anyone that part. When the story made it around later, it came from someone else entirely. They said you could tell when you were near the stretch because the air changed, heavy, thick like a storm before it broke. Some drivers said it pressed on your chest, others said it made your ears ring, like being too close to high voltage. One driver, Reed they called him, claimed it smelled like pond water. Stale, he told the others one night at the Petro off exit 230. Like a swamp you left out in the sun too long. You know that smell? Algae, rot, something that ain't quite dead, but it's thinking about it. Reed was a big man, sunburnt face, knuckles scarred from tie-down chains. He didn't scare easy, but when he talked about that smell, his voice got tight. Said he'd been hauling a load of grain through a thunderstorm. Lightning so close, it turned the mirrors blue. The CB started spitting half-words in between bursts of static, little gasps, syllables that didn't belong to any trucker he knew. Then, in the middle of all that noise, he heard a child's voice say, "Turn around." He laughed it off at first, thinking it was interference, until his trailer lights went dead, one by one. I pulled over," he said. "Didn't even mean to, just felt like I had to." When he climbed out, he found the road slick as glass, and off the shoulder, past the ditch, he swore he saw a set of footprints leading into the dark. Small ones, barefoot. The rain filled them faster than he could follow. He quit long haul a year later, bought a garage in Springfield. There was an old-timer named May who ran the night counter at a truck stop not far from the stretch. She kept a scrapbook behind the register full of newspaper clippings and photos that nobody else cared to remember. Accidents mostly. A tanker flipped in '82. A chain collision in 97. A minivan submerged off the shoulder in 04. The faces in those yellowed pages blurred with water damage, like the paper itself had tried to forget. When new drivers came in, talking about headlights dying, or CBs whispering in static, May would nod slow and say, "That road don't like company." Someone once asked her what she meant. She looked out the window at the rain and said, "Because we built it over someone's quiet." Nobody pressed her after that. A local legend said that before the interstate, there had been a small pond right where the asphalt now ran, a watering hole for cattle, no more than a muddy dip between fields. Sometime in the early 1900s, a storm flooded it, took half a barn and a child with it. The story shifted depending on who told it. Some said the boy's name was Elijah. Others said he was nameless, a traveler's son, washed up miles away. But everyone agreed on one thing: they never found the body. Years later, when they laid down concrete for the highway, the workers talked about how the ground bled water, no matter how deep they dug. Pumps ran all night, but by dawn, the pits filled again, dark and cold, and still. They paved over it anyway. Now, whenever the storms roll through, that same ground sweats through the cracks. A waitress named June remembered one night clear as crystal. She was closing the diner when she saw a man pull in. A driver she didn't recognize, face pale as chalk. He came in shaking, said his rig had just died near the hollow. Wouldn't start, wouldn't even crank. She offered him coffee, and he sat there for an hour, staring out the window at the rain. Finally, he said, "I thought I hit something." She asked what he meant. He told her he'd seen a figure in the middle of the lane. Small, no reflectors, no light. He'd slammed the brakes, felt the truck shudder, but when he climbed out, there was nothing there, not even a mark. Then he said, real quiet, "But when the lightning flashed, I saw him again, in the field, running." June said he left before morning. The truck was gone when she came back to open. A week later, someone found it abandoned 15 miles down the road. Driver's door open, hazard lights dead. The CB radio crowd had their own way of telling it. Late nights, when the sky went green and the storms rolled in from the west, the channel filled with static. If you were lucky, it was just interference. If you weren't, you'd hear the voice. Nobody could agree on what it said. Some thought it was crying, others a whisper that sounded almost like words, but broke apart in the wind. They called it the Echo Kid. Old man Virgil, who'd been running freight since the 70s, swore he'd heard it twice. First time, he turned up the volume out of curiosity. Second time, he threw the radio out the window. She said you could feel the sound crawling behind your ribs. There was a man who stopped to help what he thought was a stranded driver. Flashes blinking ahead, tail lights glowing through rain. He pulled over, but when he got close, the lights blinked out. No truck, no car, just empty road and the hiss of the storm. He told people later that the pavement looked wet, but not from rain. It rippled, like something underneath was breathing. He moved to Arizona soon after, said he didn't trust rain anymore. The stories went on like that, little fragments carried in the backs of throats, passed from diner to truck stop. From midnight broadcasts to online forums, nobody moderated anymore. The details changed. The fear didn't. A young couple once claimed their headlights lit up a child's face pressed against the windshield from the outside, though they were doing 60 down the highway. A tow driver said He picked up a call from mile marker 238, but when he arrived, the vehicle in distress was already submerged in a ditch filled with clear water that hadn't been there that morning. One night, a highway patrol officer chased what he thought was a trespasser along the median until the figure ran straight into a field and vanished without leaving tracks. There were skeptics, of course. Always are. People said moisture and faulty wiring explained the electronics failing. Said reflections made shapes where there weren't any. Said the rest was just panic, that storms make men see ghosts. But every skeptic had a story too. A friend of a friend, a cousin, a driver they used to know who quit after one bad night. They'd shrug, say, "I don't believe in that crap." Then they'd add, almost in a whisper, "But I don't drive that way anymore." Sometimes, on the clearest nights, when the air was sharp and full of cricket noise, you could still hear the hum of tires out there on the highway, the distant thunder rolling like a slow drum, and if you were unlucky, or maybe too curious, you could tune your CB and catch a voice caught in the static, something soft and wet-edged, saying a word you couldn't quite understand. It never came through clean. It never said the same thing twice. Just enough to make you wonder if somebody somewhere was still calling from under all that asphalt. Chapter 2. Lydon's apartment always sounded like weather. Even on still nights, the vents sighed, the refrigerator ticked, and the city wind worked its slow claws through the window gaps he'd long since stopped noticing. The quietest thing in the room was the man himself, 35, tired around the eyes, headphones pressed to his ears, while a waveform crawled across the laptop screen. Static Veil, Season 3, Episode 1. He'd recorded the intro a dozen times, and still didn't like it. You're listening to Static Veil, where we chase the ghosts hiding in frequencies and in the weather between them. I'm Lydon Marek, coming to you from... He paused, rubbed his jaw. From too many cups of coffee and not enough sunlight. He hit delete, tried again. Outside, thunder muttered like a far-off truck engine. Missouri spring. Restless and unpredictable. Perfect. Lydon wasn't the kind of man who believed in ghosts. Not exactly, but he believed in patterns, in resonance. The world hummed, and if you had the right gear and the right obsession, you could catch what most people missed. He leaned toward the mic. Tonight's story comes from the open road, from men and women who see more of America at 3 a.m. than most of us will in a lifetime. Truckers call it a cursed stretch of I-44. Radios die, lights flicker. And sometimes someone runs into the fog and doesn't come back. He let the silence hang. Then he stopped recording, exhaled through his teeth, and sat back. The apartment smelled faintly of rain and burnt circuits. His recording setup was second-hand. Mixer, mic, a half-dead laptop balanced on a milk crate, but it felt like command central. From here he'd talked to fishermen who swore they'd seen lights under frozen lakes, to a retired air traffic controller who heard voices on unused channels. The cursed road fit right in. He clicked open an email. Subject line, "Heard you talk ghosts, try 237. No body text, just a Google Maps link to a pin on I-44 and an attached audio file. He hesitated, then played it. A minute of road noise, then static. Then a child's voice, thin, mechanical through the CB distortion, saying, "Help." He froze. Replayed it, the same word. No background reverb, no compression artifact, the sort of sound that lived between frequencies. He stared at the screen, a long while. The thunder outside cracked again, closer this time, and the room's lights dimmed. The next day, he drove out to the edge of the city, where the interstate began to flatten into farmland. He told himself it was research. In truth, he just wanted to see the sky widen. Storm chasers were the only people who smiled at weather alerts, and Leiden had spent a few seasons doing freelance footage for meteorology networks. He still kept his Doppler app on the home screen, still watched the green and yellow veins crawl east across the radar like a living thing. He parked at a rest stop and watched the semis drift in and out, metal whales, each carrying its own story. The people who drove them all looked the same when they climbed down, a mixture of fatigue and defiance, like men stepping off a small war. He walked into the diner attached to the fuel station. The place smelled of wet asphalt and bacon grease. A trucker sat at the counter, grey beard, eyes sunk behind glasses. Leiden ordered coffee, waited, then said lightly, "Hey, you ever hear anything about a stretch of I-44 people don't like driving?" The man's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Son," he said, "you mean the cursed one?" "That's the one." The man chuckled without humor. "You a reporter?" "Podcaster. Same thing, less pay." They talked. The man's name was Ellis Ward. He'd been hauling freight since the 80s. Leiden listened, recorder hidden under his sleeve, while Ellis described dead radios, flickering lights, a kid on the shoulder. When the story was done, Ellis looked at him carefully. "You're not thinking of going out there, are you?" "I'm thinking of recording some ambience, that's all." Ellis shook his head. "That's what everyone says before the road talks back." That night, back in his apartment, Leiden edited the interview. The man's voice sounded weather-beaten even through the condenser mic. He layered in low, ambient hum. Thunder he'd recorded himself. The story breathed differently when he played it through his studio monitors. Less anecdote, more haunting. He thought of the child's voice from the anonymous email. Help. He tried running the clip through filters. Frequencies shifted, tones stretched. There was something behind the word, a wet scrape, like bubbles rising through mud. He looped it, slowed it to half speed, then quarter speed, until it sounded less like a voice and more like something exhaling through water. At 2 a.m., he stepped out onto the balcony for air. The storm was moving in again, low clouds flashing with silent lightning. From somewhere down the street came the thin wail of a train. It sounded too much like the recording. He whispered into the dark, "Who sent that file?" and almost expected an answer. 2 days later, he was sitting in the station cafe with a woman named May, the same one from the diner scrapbook, though he didn't know that yet. She poured him coffee from a steel pot and said, "You're the one asking about ghosts on the highway." He nodded. "Then you ought to look at this." She slid a yellowed photograph across the counter. It showed a field, half flooded, a wooden fence vanishing into water. "That's where they built the road now. Back then, it was a pond." He examined the photo. "Where'd you get this?" "My grandfather said a boy drowned there in 1904. Storm came through, turned the ground to soup. They found his hat, but not him." Her eyes flicked to the window, where rain was starting again. "Storms always come back around here." He recorded her too, with permission, but when he played the tape back in his car later, her last sentence was missing. Only the hiss of rain remained, and underneath it a faint gurgle. By week's end, the wall of his apartment was covered in printouts, maps, newspaper archives, quotes. At the center, circled in red, mile 237, 240. He told his podcast followers in a teaser episode that he was going on site. His inbox flooded. Stories, warnings, one email simply reading, "Don't call for him." He laughed it off. Superstition was part of the job. Yet every night, as the storm fronts built, he found himself replaying the word help and feeling, for the first time, that it wasn't addressed to him, but through him, like he'd been mistaken for someone else. He packed the gear anyway: cameras, CB radio, field recorder, spare batteries, a thermos of coffee. He labeled the drive Cursed Road Sessions. Before leaving, he sat once more before the mic. "Next time you hear from me," he said softly, "I'll be out there where the signals die. If you're listening, and I think some of you always are, keep the dial open." He stopped the recording, checked the levels, then shut down the lights. The hum of the apartment faded until only the rain remained. And somewhere, in that soft hiss, just before the thunder cracked, he could have sworn he heard a child's breath brush the mic, close, intimate, impossibly wet, whispering the single syllable that started it all. Help. Chapter 3. The rain had a way of finding him. Lydon figured that out somewhere past Springfield, when the wipers squeaked against glass and the world blurred into the grey shimmer of the highway. He'd planned his route carefully, 12 interviews, a dozen perspectives, but when he saw the yellow neon of a diner blinking through the drizzle, he pulled off almost without thinking. It looked like the kind of place where stories stuck to the walls. Marlene's Truck Haven. That's what the rusted sign said. It's Haven, flickering between Haven and Have. Inside, the smell of fried onions and diesel drifted through the low hum of country radio and the buzz of old fluorescents. Every booth held a trucker with a story written on his face. Lydon picked a corner table and ordered black coffee. He set his recorder on the tabletop, its red light blinking faintly in the gloom. It wasn't hard to start a conversation here. All he had to do was mention I-44. The first man to speak was heavy-set, mid-50s. Beard like wire and a faded cat diesel power cap perched low on his brow. "Damn road eats electricity," he said. "Last summer, I'm heading west toward Joplin. Rain's hitting sideways, and my radio goes stone dead. Not static, dead, like it had been unplugged." He rubbed at the condensation on his mug. "Then there's this flash of lightning, bright enough to blind me, and in that flash, little shape running across the asphalt, maybe 4 feet tall. Bare feet, man. I hit the brakes so hard my rig fishtailed." He paused, watching the rain crawl down the window. "When I stopped, there weren't no kid, but I swear I saw footprints in the beam of my headlights, little wet ones, then, poof, gone when I blinked." Lydon let the silence hold for a while before asking, "What mile marker was that?" The trucker shrugged. "Round 180. Doesn't matter, though. It's that whole stretch. Ask anyone." The next voice came from the next booth over. A woman in a denim jacket with her hair tied up under a red bandana. "You ain't the only one," she said, sliding into the conversation without looking up from her plate. "2 months ago, I got caught in one of those freak storms. Lightning so close it felt like the air itself was screaming. My CB crackles, then goes quiet. Then I hear it, somebody calling over the radio. A boy kept saying, 'Help me.'" She shivered, stabbing at her eggs with her fork. "Problem is, my set was off. Dead battery. I was hearing him through nothing." Lydon's hand hovered over the recorder. He felt a tiny electric tingle under his skin. The same charge that always came right before a storm. "You're sure your radio wasn't powered?" She looked up at him then, her eyes pale and flat. "You think I'd forget something like that?" A third trucker, old as dust and thin as a crow, leaned from his stool at the counter. "Hell, I seen it different," he rasped. "Ain't no boy, it's water. GPS shows I'm driving through it, like the highways under a lake. Whole screen turns blue for 5 miles, then back to normal. Makes your teeth hum when it happens." He tapped the side of his temple with a yellowed fingernail. "You know the ground's wrong there, right? Soil don't drain, that's why the fog hangs low. Ain't natural." Lydon asked his questions carefully, shaping the answers into sound bites in his head. The flicker of lights, the child in the rain, the dead radios. But what struck him wasn't what they said. It was when they said it happened. Every timestamp, every note jotted on his pad, fell within the same kind of storm. Thunder rolling off the plains, clouds like bruises. Always rain, always lightning. "Sir," he traced the lines on his map between the stories, the mile markers like pinpricks in a constellation. It looked almost too neat. Maybe, he thought, that's what the human brain does, find order in noise, patterns in static. Maybe the highway was just a scar, and he was mistaking it for a message. Still, as he left Marlene's, the storm thickened. His coffee-stained notes fluttered in the wind, and when he caught them, his fingers tingled again, like brushing against a live wire. Out in the parking lot, the semis were lined like sleeping beasts, engines ticking as they cooled. Somewhere in the fog, a CB squawked, just a short burst, then silence. Lydon froze, listening. The sound came again, a whisper through static. Just a syllable, maybe a name. He flipped open his recorder and let it run. The rain fell harder, beating time against the roof of his SUV. Inside, the red light blinked, catching his reflection in the windshield, eyes wide, face half lit by neon. He pressed the mic close to his mouth. "Truck stop confessions," he murmured. "Night 2, I-44. They all say it starts when the lightning hits." Then he switched the recorder off, but the static in the air didn't stop. It followed him as he drove away, a low whisper, curling through the speakers, though the radio was unplugged. And for a brief, impossible second, his GPS map flickered blue as if he were crossing a body of water that wasn't there. Chapter 4. The storm came crawling out of Oklahoma like a living thing. By late afternoon, the air was too heavy to breathe right, the kind of pressure that made dogs hide and radios hum. Clouds stacked above the horizon in bruised layers, purple over green, moving faster than the wind beneath them. The forecast called it a supercell system, sweeping east across Missouri. Lydon called it a summons. He sat in his apartment with the blinds half drawn, every light off except the monitors. Weather radar pulsed in slow circles on one screen, a constellation of angry red and orange spreading toward the interstate. His recording setup blinked quietly beside him. Mixer, laptop, microphone, and a battered portable CB unit that looked older than he was. Its casing was pitted, buttons half-worn smooth from use. When he'd bought it at a flea market years ago, the seller told him it had stories in it already. Static muttered through its speaker now, faint and constant, like the ocean caught in a seashell. He told himself it was atmospheric interference stormfront, ion buildup, all that, but sometimes, when the wind died outside, the static shaped itself into something almost like breathing. He leaned back in his chair and hit record. "This is Leiden Ma," he said softly, his voice flattening the hum in the room. Podcast log, episode draft, working title, The Cursed Road. Tonight, I'm driving out toward mile marker 180. Locals say the storms make it worse, so I figured I'd bring the storm with me. He smiled to himself. It sounded melodramatic out loud, but that was fine. The mic loved drama. He cut the recording and began to pack. Camera, dash mounts, spare batteries. EM reader, mostly for theatrics, though he liked the idea of something measuring what his eyes couldn't. 2 digital recorders, 1 wired to the CB's output. He'd done this routine 100 times, chasing other myths. Ghost lights in Texas, the phantom train in Kentucky, the drowned church bells off Michigan's shore. Always the same procedure. But this time felt different, closer. When he opened the door, the heat broke like glass. Thunder rolled low across the city. Out on the balcony, the first drops of rain were already the size of coins. He drove south, the storm ahead of him. By the time he reached the outskirts of Springfield, the daylight had bled out completely. Highway signs glowed like relics under the sodium lamps, and the storm clouds moved in layered veils of green and black. His windshield wipers fought to keep up, but it was a losing battle. Each flash of lightning showed the world for an instant and erased it, the next trucks shimmering through sheets of rain, power lines bent in the wind, a deer frozen at the tree line before disappearing back into the dark. He kept the CB on low volume. Static hissed like a snake coiled somewhere out of sight. Every so often, it popped and fluttered, carrying ghost voices, fragments of real transmissions blurred by weather. He knew enough radio work to separate human chatter from interference, but tonight the line blurred. The voices were too faint to be words, but their rhythm was wrong for mere noise. Leiden turned on his digital recorder and spoke into the void. "Night 1, he said. I-44 westbound. Approaching the stretch the truckers call cursed. Wind shear, multiple lightning strikes. Let's see what breathes out here." He smiled faintly at his own phrasing, too poetic, but it kept him steady. Outside, the rain thickened until the world narrowed to the reach of his headlights. For a while he just drove, hypnotized by the wiper rhythm and the way the lightning seemed to walk across the sky. The CB whispered occasionally nothing he could name, and the EM reader in the passenger seat flickered between 0 and static blips. He didn't believe in ghosts, not exactly, but he believed in resonance, the way places remember what happens to them. How sound can linger in materials the same way water soaks into earth. At mile marker 176, his phone buzzed with a weather alert. Tornado watch until 3 a.m. He laughed, softly, perfect timing. He pulled into an overlook, just before the highway bent east. The storm had grown monstrous, its heart pulsing with lightning that lit the world in slow-motion blinks. He stepped out of the car. Rain slapped his face. The smell of ozone and asphalt filled the air. He set the camera on the hood, pointed it toward the boiling sky, and let it roll. The CB crackled behind him, faint and tremulous. "Low! Help!" He froze. The voice had cut clean through the static. Not the low, garbled tone of another trucker higher, softer, young. He stepped back toward the SUV, water running cold down his neck. The CB repeated the sound, just one word, but distorted, almost like it was underwater. Leiden leaned in, watching the red light blink. "Say again?" The radio hissed, then went dead. He waited, half expecting another voice, Another pop of sound. But there was nothing. Only the wind pushing the storm forward. He stood there until lightning split the ridge in the distance, carving a jagged white scar across the plains. For a second it illuminated everything. The road, the fields, his reflection in the SUV's window, and for that same second, he thought he saw something else reflected beside him. A small figure, out in the rain, turned toward the light. Then darkness again. He backed into the driver's seat, breathing hard, water dripping from his hair onto the console. He checked the recorder still running. He looked at the playback meter, silent, clean. Whatever he'd heard hadn't registered. He stared out the windshield for a long time, the storm moving over him, before finally saying aloud, just to break the silence, "If this is how it starts, I'm ready." He hit record again, and the SUV filled with the pulse of rain and the heartbeat thump of wipers. Out past the reach of his headlights, the highway curved into blackness. And somewhere beyond that curve, lightning struck again, revealing, for just the blink of a second, the faint shimmer of water, pooled where there shouldn't have been any. Chapter 5. The storm moved east, but the road didn't feel any lighter. It felt hollow, like sound itself was being pulled into the pavement. Leiden drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the recorder. He'd turned the volume down on the CB, but the static still breathed in and out of the speakers, a thin electric wheeze that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. Outside, lightning spidered across the horizon, silent, until the thunder rolled in, seconds later, like a body dragging through mud. The GPS froze for the third time in an hour. "Come on," he muttered, tapping the screen. The blue dot pulsed, then jumped backward several miles. He frowned, checked the signal bars. None, not even a faint ghost of data. He'd downloaded offline maps before leaving, so it didn't matter much, but something about the way it glitched made his chest tighten. The coordinates shifted, like they were recalculating in circles, searching for a signal that didn't exist. He turned the CB volume up a notch. Static, then silence, then, "Help me." The voice was thin, stretched by distance. Not the radio's usual range of interference, but something dampened, like it came from under a blanket or water. Leiden froze, eyes darting to the speaker. "Say again?" Nothing, just a low hiss, like breath caught in a throat. Lightning flashed again. The headlights flickered in sync with it. He noticed, for the first time, that the flicker wasn't random. It pulsed like it was being timed with something outside the storm. He reached over to mark a timestamp on his recorder, but the button light had dimmed to a dull orange. The battery indicator had dropped from full to half in under an hour. Power drain," he whispered. "You've got to be kidding me." He adjusted the dial. The CB crackled back to life, briefly, just long enough for the voice to whisper again. "Help. Me." The whisper came clearer this time, enough that his whole body went rigid. Then the radio died completely. He pulled over. Rain hammered the windshield. The thunder was closer now, rolling over the plains like something alive. He shut off the engine. For a second, there was only the sound of rain ticking against metal. Then he noticed something else. Faint tapping, lighter than the rain. He looked up. Footprints. Small, wet footprints appeared on the pavement ahead of his car, illuminated by the uneven pulse of his headlights. They weren't there a moment ago, bare feet, the shape of a child's. Each step appeared in rhythm with the lightning, like the storm itself was bringing them into being, one flash at a time. He got out of the SUV, recording gear slung over his shoulder. Rain soaked through his jacket instantly. "Hello?" he shouted, voice nearly swallowed by the wind. "If someone's out here..." Lightning flashed again. This time, he saw movement, a flicker at the edge of the road. A small figure running toward the fog. Bare feet, slapping wet asphalt. Then darkness again. He sprinted forward, breath ragged, but when the next lightning strike came, there was nothing there, only empty road stretching into mist. The footprints ended abruptly at a puddle that shouldn't have existed, a shallow pool shimmering in the beam of his flashlight. The reflection rippled as though disturbed. Leiden crouched beside it. The water smelled faintly of iron and something older, like algae left in the sun. Beneath the surface, something pale glimmered just for an instant, before vanishing when a raindrop broke the mirror. He exhaled, breath trembling, and turned the flashlight on himself, filming the moment. "This is Leiden Ma," he said, voice shaking. "Mile marker 180. CB interference. Light failure, and... I don't know how to describe this. Footprints. Child-sized. They appeared when the light dimmed. His flashlight beam wavered, then went out entirely. He smacked it against his palm, but it stayed dead. Behind him, the CB in the car clicked on by itself. A rush of static filled the night. "Me." Leiden turned slowly toward the sound. The SUV's headlights were pulsing rhythmically. 2 slow flickers, pause, 2 more. Almost like a heartbeat. He got back inside, shivering, water dripping onto the seat. His hands trembled as he reached for the recorder. The screen was black, but the red light blinked faintly, still recording. He stared at it, unsure if he wanted to know what it had captured. Then thunder cracked directly overhead, so loud it shook the steering wheel in his hands. For a moment, the world was white. When his vision cleared, everything electronic in the car had gone dead. No headlights, no dashboard lights, no sound but the wind and rain. And yet, over that silence, he heard the whisper again, this time not through speakers, but right beside him. "Help me!" He turned, but the passenger seat was empty. Water dripped from nowhere, forming a small puddle on the fabric. In the faint glow of lightning, he saw the impression of a small hand pressed into the damp seat cushion. It lingered, then faded, like breath on glass. He sat frozen, gripping the wheel, until the next flash of light brought the world back. The car's electronics flickered to life again, as if nothing had happened. Dashboard glowing, GPS unfreezing, CB crackling with mundane highway chatter. Everything normal. Almost. The EM reader on the seat beside him ticked to red, then flatlined. He hit record again, voice low and deliberate. "Night 1. End of log. Something's out here. Or maybe it's still here." He drove on into the storm, headlights trembling against the dark, and for the first time, he realized that the lightning wasn't just lighting the sky, it was showing him something beneath it, something buried, something waiting. Chapter 6. By dawn, the storm had broken, leaving the world drenched and steaming. The air smelled of wet dirt and asphalt. Every tree along the highway looked darker, like it had been burned. Leiden hadn't slept. He drove east toward a gas station he'd marked on his map, one that, according to 3 different truckers, sat right near the start of the bad stretch. The rain tapered to a drizzle as he pulled in. The sign above the awning read, Henley's Fuel Snack. The paint was peeling, the U missing. A payphone leaned against the wall like an exhausted man. He parked under the canopy, engine ticking, and checked his recorder. The battery was nearly drained again, though it had been charging the whole drive. When he rewound a few seconds of the night's audio, the whisper was still there. Fainter now, but there. Help me. He shut it off. Inside, the gas station smelled like coffee that had been on the burner too long, and motor oil. Behind the counter sat a woman in her late 30s, hair tied back, reading an old paperback whose cover was half gone. A small TV behind her showed the weather. Residual thunderstorms expected tonight across Greene County. She looked up when he came in. You look like the rain chewed you up, she said, setting her book down. Feels about right. He smiled weakly, unzipping his soaked jacket. Coffee? Self-serve. Cream's probably expired. He poured a cup, anyway, and noticed her watching him, not suspicious, just curious. When he reached for his wallet, she nodded toward his recorder hanging from his shoulder strap. Journalist? Podcaster, he said. Leiden Ma. I'm working on a piece about... He hesitated, unsure how much to say. Local folklore. Her expression didn't change, but she tapped her fingernail against the counter. Then you're here for the road. That got his attention. You've heard of it? I live next to it, she said, gesturing vaguely toward the east window, where the clouds still bruised the sky. Been hearing stories since I was old enough to reach that door handle. Folks come through here all the time with something to tell. But it's not stories, not really. It's memories that don't belong to them. He leaned on the counter. What do you mean? The woman, her name tag said May, looked him over, gauging if he was the type who'd mock what he didn't understand. Apparently, she decided he wasn't. Before they built this part of I-44, she began, there was a basin here. Natural depression in the land, filled up when it rained. People used to call it Hollow Pond. Not much of a pond, really more like a pit that caught runoff. My granddad said in the spring it'd rise high enough to swallow fence posts. She poured herself a cup of coffee too, black as motor oil. One summer, over 100 years ago, a boy drowned there. Nobody could figure how. Water wasn't deep. Some said he slipped and hit his head. Others said the mud pulled him under. His folks looked for him 3 days, found him floating after the third storm. Her eyes drifted toward the window, unfocused. They drained the pond decades later, filled it in with gravel when they laid the first roadbed. Didn't matter. Water still tries to come back every time the ground gets soaked. You've seen it, the low fog that hugs the asphalt. It's the land remembering where it used to breathe. Leiden felt the hairs rise on his neck. Your grandfather told you that? May nodded. He said the night they found the boy, lightning struck the pond, split a tree clean in half. They said it burned blue for an hour after. Leiden took a long sip of coffee to steady his hands. And people still see him? May shrugged. Sometimes, or they hear him, depends how close you get. My uncle was a driver, swore he heard a child crying through his CB once, said it came in clear as a bell, even though he'd turned the damn thing off minutes earlier. She leaned forward. You want to know the strangest part? When they built the highway, the construction crew found something under the fill. Old timbers, like a dock or a pier. Out here, miles from any lake. State came, did a quiet removal. No one talked about it again. My granddad said they covered it right up, but the water, she pointed toward the floor. It always finds its way back. The rain started again, soft at first, then harder. It pattered against the metal roof, like fingers drumming. Lydon took out his notebook, scribbling notes. His pulse was steady now. The earlier terror transformed into curiosity. Do you think the stories are connected? The boy, the road, the storms? May looked past him, her gaze distant. You ever notice the lightning? It always hits that stretch first. Always. Even when the rest of the sky's quiet. My granddad said it's because the ground remembers what it took. That kind of loss doesn't fade. Her words hung there between them, mingling with the sound of the rain. He closed his notebook and reached for his wallet. Thanks for the coffee and the story. She smiled faintly. You're welcome, but if you're going out there again tonight... She hesitated. Don't stop when you see the fog. No matter what you hear, just keep driving. Lydon nodded, though he wasn't sure he could promise that. Outside, the world had gone grey again. He sat in the SUV, recorder running, watching the clouds build where the highway disappeared eastward. He overlapped an old survey map on his GPS. Tracing the basin, May mentioned a shape of water that used to exist long before the asphalt. The overlay fit perfectly. Mile marker 180, cut straight through its center. He stared at it, feeling that quiet electric pressure in his chest again. The pond beneath, he whispered into the recorder. That's what this is. Not a haunting, a displacement. Thunder rumbled far off, deep and patient. He closed the map. When he started the engine, the radio came alive without him touching it. For a second, just static, then a low, rhythmic sound beneath it. Dripping. Water. Then the faintest breath of a voice. Still here? Lydon didn't move. He just watched the fog roll down from the hills, slow and deliberate, as if something beneath the ground was exhaling. Chapter 7. Lydon didn't sleep that night. Not because he wasn't tired, he was bone deep, that trembling exhaustion that comes after the adrenaline wears off, but because the idea of closing his eyes felt dangerous. The kind of danger that doesn't come from being followed, but from being noticed. So he stayed up in the motel room, cross-legged on the carpet, the whine of the mini-fridge buzzing like a mosquito at the edge of his hearing. His laptop sat open, screen dimmed to save power, waveforms crawling across it like a heartbeat on life support. The file he kept replaying was the one from the CB radio, the whisper. It started faint, like static pretending to be language, a nothing sound, something your brain was built to ignore. But then when you listened long enough, it leaned forward. Help. He tapped the space bar, letting it play again. The whisper slurred, drowned under the hiss of wind and interference. He rewound 2 seconds, slowed the playback by half, then again. Help me. Lydon froze. The voice, if it was a voice, was small, fragile. A child's. He dragged his headphones off, staring at the wall where damp wallpaper peeled into curls. The motel clock blinked 2:37 a.m. Somewhere outside, a truck engine coughed to life, rolled out into the rain, and left the night heavier behind it. He pressed play again. This time, he listened all the way through. The whisper repeated 3 times, each softer than the last, like something sinking underwater. Help me, help me, help me. Then came the breathing. He hadn't noticed it before, maybe because it wasn't on the earlier files. It came from the left channel only, uneven, shallow. Someone or something was breathing right next to the microphone. He pulled the headphones off and looked at his gear on the desk. The portable CB, the handheld recorder, the directional mic. They all sat there, innocent, their red standby lights blinking like tiny, patient eyes. Lydon rubbed his face. Okay, maybe it's me. He checked the timestamps. The file began at 11:19 p.m., the same time his dashcam had shorted out. He pulled up that footage too, overlaying both audio and video. The car interior flickered under lightning flashes. Static swallowed the sound. Then, right when the whisper hit, the camera tilted, ever so slightly, like something brushed against the passenger door. Lydon rewound, slowed the frame, zoomed in. There for 1 second was a blur in the reflection of the window. Not a shape, not even a shadow, more like a smudge that shouldn't be there. A wrongness your eyes only recognize after your brain insists it's real. He paused the frame, cropped it. The blur had edges now, like hair maybe, or fingers against the glass. He felt it again then, that strange heaviness in the air, like the motel room had suddenly been filled with unseen humidity. His ears popped. The hum of the fridge deepened, like it was swallowing its own sound. And through that muffled quiet, the CB radio clicked. Once. Then again. He turned toward it. The light was off. No power, no signal, yet the speaker hissed faintly, like it was clearing its throat. Lydon. The voice wasn't the boy's this time. It was older, worn thin, maybe a man's. It sounded like wind through teeth. He stood, the floor creaking beneath him. Who is this? No answer. Just a long, dragging static, like waves retreating from a shore. He reached forward, thumb hovering over the switch. Not his fault. Lydon snatched his hand back. What did you say? The static popped once, twice, then silence. He waited. Every sound in the room felt amplified. His heartbeat, the clock, the rain, all of it stitched together into one unbearable frequency. When nothing else came, he sat back down, hit record on his digital notes. Entry day 4, 3:06 a.m. Audio evidence recovered, multiple EVP layers, distorted whisper, possibly help me or find me. Playback anomaly detected. CB interference, unknown source. Male voice says, not his fault. Speculative connection. Drowning victim. Local story mentioned boy and water. Cross-reference with May's account of the pond. Note. Emotional reaction stronger than expected. Possible influence. Equipment contamination. He stopped recording. There was something about hearing himself talk that made it worse, made it more real. He stared at the monitor again, eyes blurring from fatigue. He filtered the audio by frequency band, the whisper isolated into its cleanest range. Then, like a puzzle, he layered it over itself, creating a spectral echo. Help me, help me, help. Only now, underneath the pattern, another shape of sound appeared, a low murmur. He enhanced the gain. Oliver. The name slipped out of the static, like a fish darting through the reeds. Lydon froze, listening again. This time, he was sure. The voice said, Oliver. He searched the local paper archives online, the way he always did when something clicked. Nothing recent, but when he filtered by older editions, digitized obituaries, scanned articles, one headline from 1913 surfaced. Local boy drowns in flash flood body recovered from lowland pond. Oliver M. Keene, age 7, drowned during sudden storm near mile marker 223. Mother reports he was last seen chasing his toy boat into the water. Lydon stared at it. The black and white image was grainy, a small boy in suspenders, hair slicked back, serious eyes staring at a camera that would outlive him. He whispered the name under his breath. Oliver. The CB radio hissed again. He turned to it slowly, every nerve in his body tightening. The light flickered once, bright enough to cast a shadow across the wall. Then it went dead. Lydon stood motionless for a long time. Then he closed his laptop, packed up his gear, and said to no one, "All right, Oliver, I hear you." Outside, thunder rolled across the plains. The rain was heavier now, hammering the roof in steady rhythm. Lydon lay down, though he didn't expect sleep. The storm would pass eventually, but the sound, that voice, had already attached itself somewhere deeper than his ears. And when he did finally drift off, it wasn't silence that followed him. It was breathing, soft, wet, close enough to fog the inside of his dreams. Chapter 8. The air that morning was too still. That's how Lydon knew. He'd been chasing storms long enough to recognize the quiet before a thunderhead opens its throat, the charged hush, the smell of ozone, the way the light dims. In a way you can't photograph. It wasn't just the weather, it was the world taking a breath. The radar on his tablet painted a bruised shape across southern Missouri, deep purple, velocity signatures curling like a clenched fist. It wasn't just a thunderstorm, it was the kind of system that made headlines, tore roofs from barns, and rewrote towns in a night. Perfect timing. He loaded the SUV with methodical hands. Dash cam mounted, CB wired into the aux jack. Microphones, tripods, a spare battery pack, 3 external drives. It wasn't paranoia anymore, it was procedure. By 4:10 p.m., he was on the road. The windshield shimmered with a haze that wasn't quite rain yet. He turned on the wipers anyway, more out of ritual than need. His voice recorder blinked red from the cup holder. "Night 5, he said into it, approaching I-44, mile marker 220. Forecast indicates rotation to the west. Locals call this section the Cursed Road. Let's see what breathes out here." He almost smiled at that last line. It sounded like something out of a bad ghost hunting special, but the words carried weight now, a private joke with something that might be listening. The static started early this time, before he even reached the main stretch. The CB sputtered and crackled, whispering fragments of chatter that didn't belong to any frequency in use. Mile marker 223. Turn back. Not his fault. He turned the volume down a notch, but didn't mute it. Not yet. The highway unrolled ahead of him, pale and wet under a bruising sky. The storm clouds had gathered in a tower, an anvil top, miles high, and the light that filtered through it was sickly green, like pond water. Lydon kept one hand on the wheel, the other on the recorder. Visibility low, CB interference continuing. Possible temperature drop. I can feel it through the glass. The hairs on his arms stood straight. The steering wheel buzzed faintly, not vibration from the road, but charge. He knew that feeling from years of storm chasing, the air before a strike. Then, in the distance, lightning split the horizon. For a fraction of a second, everything was too visible. The fields, the guardrails, the skeletal trees clawing at the wind. And something else, a small shape in the median, standing still in the downpour. He blinked, and it was gone. Lydon eased the car onto the shoulder, hazard lights ticking like a clock in a tomb. He wiped condensation from the inside of the windshield and leaned forward. Nothing, just the fog, moving slow across the asphalt, like breath. He switched the dash cam to manual record, aimed the mic toward the passenger window. I saw a figure, looked like a child, small frame, barefoot, standing in the median, around 221. The CB spat a burst of static so violent it made him flinch. Then, through the distortion, Oliver. Leiden's pulse jumped. He reached for the mic. "Oliver, is that you?" Static. Then another voice layered under it, older, lower, the one he'd heard in the motel. "Not his fault." He tried again. "Whose fault then?" The reply came like a sigh through gravel. "The water." Then the CB died completely. No hiss, no hum, just a silence that felt deliberate. The rain thickened. Sheets of it slanted across the windshield, the wipers smearing instead of clearing. Every bolt of lightning turned the world white for a breath, and in each flash, he thought he saw movement at the edge of the road, running alongside him, just beyond where the light could reach. He pressed record again, speaking over the noise. Unidentified interference resumed. CB offline. Visual anomaly, possible apparition. Multiple sightings along median. Requesting timestamp cross-reference later. Sir, he couldn't help the shake in his voice. Thunder cracked so loud it shuddered the frame of the SUV. His headlights flickered, dimmed, then steadied again, but weaker. The dashboard clock reset to 0 o'clock. The radio turned itself on, even though it had been unplugged. From the speakers came a faint gurgling sound, wet and rhythmic. Then faintly, a boy's voice. Help me." Leiden gripped the wheel tighter. The temperature inside the car had dropped sharply. His breath fogged the glass. The smell hit next. Muddy water, like the bottom of a lake after a storm. He looked out at the field beyond the guardrail. Something glinted there in the lightning, a shimmer, like rippling water. But that was impossible. Then he remembered May's words. The highway was built over the pond. He killed the engine. The rain filled the silence like static made liquid. Leiden stepped out into it, the cold hitting him like a slap. His recorder clipped to his jacket, the red light winking against the storm. "Oliver," he shouted over the wind. "Nothing." He walked toward the median, boots splashing in runoff. The asphalt was slick underfoot, puddles rippling with each drop. A flash, and for that heartbeat of light, he saw wet footprints leading into the fog, small, bare. He followed them. Each step forward made the air feel heavier, thicker. The rumble of thunder grew distant, swallowed by a low, wet, humming sound like the ground itself was vibrating. When the next lightning bolt struck, he saw it the shimmer again, only closer. And this time, it wasn't water. It was reflection. A film of something transparent hovering just above the ground, rippling like heat waves. Beneath it, dark shapes moved slowly, like fish under ice. He raised his recorder. Possible water mirage effect, but it's... The rest was cut off by a deafening crack of thunder. His mic spiked. The shimmer broke open, the air folding in on itself with a sound like a breath sucked backward. The world stuttered light and dark flickering, and Leiden saw, for a split second, what lay beneath the highway. A pond, black water, and the reflection of a little boy standing on its surface, staring up at him. Then gone. He stumbled back, gasping. His car's headlights flared once, then went black. The storm howled like something alive. Leiden turned and ran for the SUV, every instinct screaming to leave, to get out before whatever was below that road remembered it could climb. He slammed the door, hit the ignition. Nothing. Dead. He grabbed the voice recorder and spoke through his shaking. I don't know what I just saw. Possible optical illusion. But there was water under the road. There was. The voice said the water. He stopped. From the back seat came a faint dripping sound. He turned slowly. There was no one there, but the upholstery was wet-soaked like something had climbed in out of the rain. Then through the fogged rear window, a small handprint appeared. Lydon stared. It was too small to be his. The fingers were spread wide, the palms smudged, as if pressed against glass, from the inside. Lightning flashed again, blinding white, and in that single frame of light reflected in the glass, he saw a boy's face looking back at him, mouth open as if calling through water. Then it was gone. Lydon's recorder was still running when he whispered, Oliver, I hear you. Thunder rolled again, long, low, like the sky itself groaning. He didn't remember starting the car, but suddenly the headlights were back, weak but alive, and he was driving, tires hissing on the drenched road, hands shaking on the wheel. The CB sputtered to life one last time as he sped past mile marker 223. Help me! And over it, faint but clear, the same older voice. Not his fault. The static swallowed both, and then only the rain remained. Lydon didn't stop until the storm was a smear in the rearview mirror. He didn't talk again until dawn, when he pressed record with a trembling thumb. End of field log Thunderhead. Something is buried beneath that road, and it's still breathing. Chapter 9. The rain hadn't stopped. It had just learned to whisper. It came down in sheets that weren't loud anymore, only constant, like the hiss of tape when it reaches the end of the reel but keeps spinning. Lydon sat in the driver's seat, both hands slack on the wheel. The CB was dead. The dashlights blinked back to life in erratic pulses, stuttering like a dying heartbeat. When the SUV finally rebooted, when the electronics decided to breathe again, he almost didn't notice at first. The headlights flared back up, dim but alive, the dashboard reanimating one icon at a time. Then came the sound, and not from the CB, not from the radio either. It was coming from everywhere at once. The car speakers, the laptop fan, the portable recorder, even the dashcam emitted a faint hum, like it was remembering a tune. Through that tangled mess of noise came a voice, small, broken. A child crying through water. Help me. Lydon froze. His pulse thumped behind his eyes. He checked the radio display. It showed no frequency, no source, just blinking uselessly. The sound looped, the crying, the splash, the low drone of storm static, over and over again. He hit record on the digital mic. Unexplained broadcast reinitiated after power loss. Voice identical to prior samples. Juvenile, distressed. No identifiable frequency. Loop duration, approximately 12 seconds. Recording. Lightning slashed the sky ahead of him, turning the world into bone and ink. The voice warped, pitch sliding up, then down, like the signal was stretching. Then he heard something new, buried under the cry. A slosh. The sound of tires grinding through mud. He turned down the volume, listening harder. It wasn't just in the recording, it was outside, faint but real, blending with the rain. He killed the engine and cracked the window. The crying continued, louder now, and underneath it, a rhythmic churn, like wheels turning in muck. Lydon's breath fogged the glass. Someone or something was out there. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped into the rain. The air was cold and heavy enough to taste, the kind of chill that sits behind your teeth. His boots sank immediately into soft, saturated dirt. The crying didn't come from the road. It came from the dark stretch of trees beyond the guardrail. He aimed his light that way. Mud glistened between the roots. He could see tire tracks, deep ones, trailing off the shoulder and vanishing into the brush. He glanced back at his SUV, the radio still hissing faintly with the looping voice. Then he climbed the guardrail. Each step off the pavement felt like walking deeper into a different world. The roar of the highway faded behind him, replaced by the quieter language of the storm, the plunk of raindrops in puddles, the sucking sound of boots pulling free of mud. He followed the tracks until they disappeared into standing water, a flooded dip in the land where the trees leaned close enough to blot out the sky. Lightning flashed. The water glimmered in that electric second, too bright, like it had caught more light than it should. Lydon crouched, breathing through his nose to keep from gasping. The flooded ditch wasn't deep, maybe a foot or two, but the reflection it cast went on and on, as if the bottom never arrived. He clipped the mic to his jacket. Found submerged area adjacent to the highway, coordinates approximate to former basin on 1913 overlay. Flooding possibly concealing pond structure, water clarity poor, reflectivity unnatural. He leaned closer. The crying sound was louder here, not echoing, but resonating, like it was vibrating up from the earth itself. His flashlight beam trembled as he scanned the surface. Nothing at first, only rain striking the water, making 1,000 tiny crowns. Then the loop from the SUV's radio broke pattern. The voice warped again, less pleading, more desperate. Help me, and then clearly, down here. Lydon's breath hitched. He turned toward the sound, lights sweeping across reeds and runoff, and saw movement. Just a shimmer at first, ripples that moved against the rain, spreading from a single point near the center of the flooded ditch. He took a step closer, his recorder catching his quickening breath. Audio source moving, no visible speaker, possibly venting water or... He stopped. Something pale floated up from beneath the surface, an outline, small, shifting, reflection of a face that wasn't his. For one impossible instant, lightning gave it form. A child's eyes open wide beneath the water, looking straight at him. Then the thunder hit, shaking the trees, and the surface went black again. Lydon stumbled back, slipping in the mud. His flashlight beam jittered, cutting wild arcs through the rain. When he caught his footing again, the water was still, silent. The crying had stopped. He stood there, soaked to the bone, heartbeat thundering in sync with the sky. The ditch rippled once more, gently this time, like something beneath had turned over in its sleep. Lydon took one step closer. The smell of stagnant water hit him. Old, earthy, laced with something metallic. His throat tightened. He crouched, lowering the microphone toward the surface. It was warm, warmer than it should have been. The radio in his car clicked back to life, audible even from here, whispering through the rain. The loop was gone now, replaced by a new sound. Soft, steady breathing. He whispered into the recorder, barely moving his lips. Source, directly below the surface. No sign of submerged debris. Possible... He stopped again. The microphone, still extended toward the ditch, tugged slightly. like someone had brushed it from below. He jerked it back. The ripples widened, spreading outward in perfect circles. The reflection, staring back up at him, wasn't his anymore. It was the boy again. Eyes black, face half submerged, mouth open as if whispering his name. Leiden. He froze. Lightning tore across the clouds again, blinding him. And in that flicker of white, he saw his own reflection beside the boy. Two shapes leaning over the water, one alive, one not, both waiting for the thunder to finish naming them. The thunder cracked. The reflection disappeared. When he opened his eyes again, he was alone. The ditch was calm. The rain thinner now, just drizzle tracing circles across the surface. But the crying continued. Not loud, not from the ditch this time. From the recorder in his hand. He looked down. The waveform on the display spiked wildly, though he hadn't spoken. The noise rising and falling in perfect rhythm to a child sobbing. He whispered, barely audible. "Oliver." The sound stopped. A single word replaced it, soft, low, and heavy with static. "Waiting." Leiden dropped the recorder. It hit the mud, the red light still blinking. Then everything went quiet, too quiet. Even the rain sounded distant, as if he'd stepped behind glass. He stood there, staring into the water until the storm rolled over him again, and the only thing left to hear was the low hum of the drowned voice beneath the surface, whispering to no one but the rain. Chapter 10. The storm had calmed to a whisper by the time Leiden reached the service road. Not silence, never silence, but that heavy waterlogged hush that comes after the sky has emptied itself. His headlights cut through mist like blades, sweeping across drenched grass and the skeletal remains of road signs that hadn't stood straight in years. Mud sucked at his boots when he stepped out. The air smelled like wet iron and ozone, a metallic tang that stung his tongue. Behind him, the SUV idled, its engine coughing soft puffs of white. Ahead, the road ended abruptly at a ditch, or rather, what used to be one. Now it was a pool. It shimmered oddly beneath the remaining arcs of lightning, not with the brown-black murk of floodwater, but with a strange mercury sheen. The light rolled across it like oil. Beneath the ripples, something deep glinted a shape, a suggestion, then nothing. Leiden crouched, pulling his recorder close to his mouth. Night 3, unmarked service path off I-44, roughly 12 miles east of the old basin. Water accumulation present, no signage, no barrier. The radio led me here. His voice sounded too loud, even over the distant thunder. He switched on the boom mic and extended it toward the water. Static still hissed faintly in his earpiece, the same constant whisper that had followed him since the blackout. The boy's voice had been looping, crying, distorted, half swallowed by rain. It had stopped only when he'd turned down this road. He adjusted his gain knob, watching the red light pulse faintly. "Okay," he murmured, "let's see what's left in you." At first there was nothing, only the low hum of the engine behind him and the occasional plop of water. Then faintly, the static bent. It formed rhythm, cadence, a voice. But not words this time. Breathing. Wet, shallow, uneven, as though someone stood just out of reach with lungs half full of water. Leiden's throat tightened. "Say it again," he whispered, not realizing he'd spoken aloud. He leaned closer to the water, the microphone hovering inches from the surface. Raindrops rippled outward, breaking his reflection into shards. In one of them, a flash, a face that wasn't his. He blinked hard, looked again. The water had stilled, mirror flat now. His own reflection stared back, jaw clenched, eyes hollowed by fatigue. But just over his shoulder, another figure, small, pale, watching him. A boy, maybe 8 years old, clothes clinging to him as though he'd just stepped from the pond. Eyes too wide, mouth moving soundlessly. Leiden's pulse slammed in his chest. He turned fast, but there was nothing there. Just rain, grass, the endless black highway beyond. When he looked back down, the reflection lingered. The boy was gone, but his own reflection did not move. Leiden froze. He waved one hand, tentative. The man in the water did not mirror him. Instead, his reflection stared for one beat too long, then slowly, with the calm of something patient, it began to smile. Leiden stumbled backward, almost falling. The boom mic cracked against the ground, recorder hissing feedback. He tore off his headphones. The air around him pulsed, faint but real like sound waves, too low to hear. Behind him, from the car's radio, came a sudden hiss, then a voice. He's still waiting. Leiden spun, heart hammering. The radio display was dead. No signal, no station. The words repeated. Softer now, the pitch bending slightly each time until they no longer sounded human. He's still waiting. He's still waiting. He's... Silence. The wind shifted. The pond's surface rippled again. The reflection, finally, catching up, moving now, matching him once more. Leiden backed toward the car, fumbling the mic and recorder into his bag. Cha! When he looked one last time, he swore he saw a hand break the surface, small, pale fingers reaching before sinking beneath. He slammed the car door shut, locked it, and gunned the engine. Tires spat mud as he reversed onto the road, headlights washing over the glimmering ditch one final time. Through the smear of rain on the windshield, he thought, or maybe just imagined, that the water was rippling outward in perfect concentric circles, as if something beneath had just taken a breath. As he drove away, his recorder light blinked on inside his bag. It had started recording again on its own. And in the faint background hiss, the voice returned. Not crying this time. Laughing. Soft, short, and wet. Like a bubble breaking the surface. Chapter 11. The storm broke sometime before dawn, but the highway never really dried. The asphalt steamed under the first pale light, releasing the smell of soaked gravel and exhaust, the scent of things that had been washed clean, yet still carried the memory of what stained them. Leiden hadn't slept. His hands trembled on the steering wheel, his eyes raw from staring too long into blackness that moved when it shouldn't. He told himself it was exhaustion, not something following. He'd driven back toward the main stretch of I-44 as soon as the rain thinned, just wanting distance, wanting the dull hum of other cars to remind him the world still existed. But the world was quieter than it should have been. The usual freight trucks were gone, the road signs blurred by mist, and the few that were visible looked somehow altered. Exit numbers didn't match his GPS. Town names flickered in his headlights like bad projections. He turned on his recorder again, needing the comfort of his own voice. Day 4, returning to the highway. The ditch, the pond, I don't know what to call it. Audio evidence remains inconclusive, though the radio interference persists. Possible cross-frequency bleed? No, that's not right. He stopped talking because his GPS screen had just changed. The familiar blue line had warped into a circle. The route label read, Echo Mile. He blinked, rubbed at his eyes, leaned closer. He hadn't typed that. It wasn't any saved location. Yet there it was, highlighted in calm blue text, as if he'd set the destination himself. Rerouting to Echo Mile. Estimated arrival, 7 minutes. Did the fashion? Bullshit. He jabbed the power button. The display flickered, then came back on. The words still there. 7 minutes. 6:59. 6:58. He cursed and yanked the cord from the outlet. But even unplugged, the screen glowed faintly, no reflection of his face, just the road ahead, rendered in a looping ribbon of pixels. Then the dashboard lights dimmed, once, twice, and the world seemed to bend with them. Out the windshield, the signs were changing. He knew this stretch, the weathered Exit 88 Fremont, the crooked green sign marking the gas station where May worked. But now the signs flickered, like a video buffering, words sliding across their metal surfaces. Exit 88 became Exit 08. Then Echo Mile, then blank, before settling again. Leiden's chest tightened. He slowed the car to 40. Rain still misted the windshield in thin sheets, catching the glare of his high beams like 1,000 silver wires. He could see the road curve ahead, except it didn't. The lines warped, weaving back into themselves. The white paint doubled, tripled, an optical illusion that refused to end. For a moment, he wasn't sure if the car was moving forward at all. He blinked, gripping the wheel until his knuckles whitened. "You're overtired," he muttered. "You're hallucinating. Pull over, pull over." But there was nowhere to pull. The shoulder was gone. The edges of the asphalt bled into grey water that reflected nothing. Not the sky, not the headlights. The GPS voice returned, calm and soft. "Continue straight for 1 mile." Leiden slammed the brakes. "What the hell are you?" "Continue straight." "No." The car idled. He shut his eyes, forced slow breaths, counted seconds. 1, 2, 3. When he opened them again, he saw movement in the misshapes on the road ahead. Not people exactly, but outlines. 4, maybe 5 figures, walking single file along the median. Silhouettes flickering in and out of the fog, with every distant flash of lightning. He turned off the headlights. Darkness swallowed them instantly. But he could still hear them. Footsteps, wet, slow, out of rhythm. The air around the SUV thickened, the humidity pressing against the glass. His breath fogged the windshield, and in the fog, something began to write itself. Letters dragged by an invisible fingertip. E-C-H-O. The rest smeared before it finished. Leiden slammed the gear into drive and hit the gas. The tires squealed, then caught, sending a fan of water into the mist. The road bent or seemed to twisting into a loop that didn't exist on any map. His headlights caught the same cracked guardrail 3 times in less than a minute. Each pass, the mile marker changed. 198, 199, 198, 198 again. He felt it. Then the dizzy, gut-sick sense that he was circling something that didn't want to let him go. And then the radio cut in, full volume. Echo. The voice wasn't mechanical this time. It was small, drowned. Echo, mile. Leiden's hands slipped on the wheel. Stop, stop. The voice grew louder, overlapping itself, like a recording stuck on rewind. Then over the static, he heard something else. His own voice, whispering. He's still waiting. He jerked the wheel. The car skidded sideways, mud spraying across the windows. For a heartbeat, the world went black. Then the headlights found pavement again, a straight stretch, unbroken, familiar. He slammed to a stop. The GPS was blank. The odometer read exactly 1 mile traveled. Lydon sat there shaking, the rain tapping the roof like fingers. The radio had gone quiet again. He could hear only the throb of his pulse and the faint click of the cooling engine. When he looked up, he saw the sign on the roadside, old, rusted, half buried in weeds. The letters were faded, almost white, but under the glare of his lights, he could still make them out. Echo Mile Road closed. He shut the engine off, heart hammering so hard it hurt. Outside, the wind carried a single word through the trees, stretched, bent, and broken by distance. Echo, and then thunder rolled again, deep and patient. And the road behind him was gone. Chapter 12. The storm chased him halfway home, dogging his taillights through Missouri's endless gray. Every few miles, it caught up. Flashes of lightning painting the trees silver, thunder rolling low and slow like the sky itself was growling. By the time Lydon crossed into his own county, the rain was little more than mist, and the highway behind him was just a smear of wet black ribbon in the rear view. He pulled into his driveway at 3:12 a.m. His fingers still trembled on the key fob. For a long minute, he just sat there in the car, engine ticking as it cooled, listening to the last faint hiss of rain against the windshield. The silence afterward was unnerving, clean, hollow, too perfect. Inside, his house felt different. The air was heavy, humid from the clothes still clinging to his skin. He turned on the lights, one by one, half expecting the bulbs to flicker the way they had out there, but they stayed solid, warm, reassuring. Home, he said out loud, just to hear the word. His voice sounded strange, flat, like it had been pressed between layers of tape. He dumped his equipment bag on the kitchen counter, peeled off his soaked jacket, and stood there, staring at the recorder's little red light. It blinked once, then twice, then stopped. He couldn't bring himself to play the files. Not yet. Lydon took a long shower, steam fogging the mirror until his reflection vanished. He almost preferred it that way. When he finally stepped out and wiped the glass, for a moment, his reflection didn't move with him. Just lagged, a heartbeat behind. He blinked, and it caught up, smooth as water, finding its level. He laughed under his breath. "Lack of sleep," he said. "You're seeing patterns again." But even as he said it, the words tasted wrong. He spent the morning cataloging the data from his trip. GPS pings, barometric readings, timestamps. Every instrument he owned had gone haywire during that 1-hour stretch. Compass readings reversed polarity. The temperature sensor showed drops of 20 degrees in under a minute. The dashcam had looped frames that didn't exist. Still, it was the audio he dreaded most. By late afternoon, he gave in. He sat at his desk, put on the headphones, and opened the file labeled session_04_final. Static greeted him, a harsh oceanic roar, layered with faint pops and hums. He adjusted the EQ, filtering out the wind. A voice floated through his own. Night 3, I-44 westbound. Storm conditions worsening, visibility poor. I can... A burst of static drowned the rest. He skipped ahead. Strange distortion at marker. Another burst. Then a faint echo beneath the noise, almost too soft to register. He slowed the playback, boosted the lower frequencies. There. A child's voice, distant, pleading. Help. The same word from the highway. Lydon exhaled shakily. He scrubbed the track backward, slowed it to half speed. The whisper thickened, became something else, like syllables folding over each other. He couldn't make them out, but the rhythm matched what he'd heard on the road, what the boy had said. He leaned closer, pressing the headphones tight. His own voice came back, a whisper underneath the child's. Only, it wasn't from that night. He hadn't recorded this part. He's still waiting. He tore the headphones off. The room buzzed with silence. He checked the waveform, scrolling to confirm. The line spiked right at the timestamp, when the car's electronics had failed. The whisper wasn't an echo. It was embedded in the noise floor, as if it had always been there. Lydon's mouth went dry. He reached for his journal and jotted down the time code. 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 33 seconds. Then he wrote a single line beneath it. My voice, not me. He forced himself to keep working. He layered the recordings, mapping the storm cells from the night before. When he overlaid the radar data, the storm's eye sat perfectly over the same mile stretch, right where the boy had appeared. The rest of the night, he listened, over and over. Every time he thought he'd found the end of the whisper, another layer unfolded, breathing, faint sobbing, a word that almost sounded like his name. By midnight, he had filled 2 pages with scribbles. Echo mile, water, static bridge, voice between frequencies. He knew he should stop. He couldn't. At 12:23, the lights in his house flickered. Once, twice. The computer screen pulsed white, then black. When it came back, the waveform was gone, replaced by a single line of text. Listen back. Lydon's throat went tight. He clicked into the audio log again. A new file had appeared, time-stamped just moments ago. He pressed play. Static, then breathing, then his own voice. This is Lydon Case, testing mic levels, recording for Static Veil, episode 27. Subject, the cursed road. He froze. That was his intro, but he hadn't started editing the episode yet. Tonight, I'm sharing something different. His voice continued, smooth and measured, like he was already in podcast mode. A sound I can't explain. A story I shouldn't tell. He whispered, What the hell? You've heard the legends. The boy in the storm. The road that loops itself. But what if I told you it's not the road that's cursed? What if it's the recording? The voice paused. When you listen too long, it listens back. Lydon yanked the headphones out. The audio kept playing through the computer speakers, distorted now, his own words melting into a mesh of static and distant thunder. The desk lamp flickered violently. The hard drive hummed, spinning faster than it should. He reached to shut it off, but the mouse wouldn't move. The cursor stayed fixed on the screen as the audio grew louder. A new voice joined in. The boy. Help me. The sound rippled through the air like a low-frequency vibration, rattling the glass of the window. The monitor dimmed, the reflection on its surface warping. He saw himself, except the reflection didn't match. It was smiling. The speakers hissed. Pop. Silence. Then a whisper so close it felt like it came from inside the headphones, still lying on the desk. He's still waiting. Lydon staggered back. The house went completely dark. Outside, thunder rolled again, distant but deliberate. He turned toward the window. Lightning flared once, illuminating his yard. For a split second, he saw wet footprints leading from his driveway to his front door. Small ones. The lights came back on. Everything looked normal. The computer screen showed his editing software open to a blank project. No files, no waveform. He saved the session anyway by instinct, not reason, and labeled it static_veil_final_episode.wav. He didn't remember pressing record, but later, when he played it back, he heard it start with a breath. His own, then his voice, calm, composed, studio-ready. "Welcome back to Static Veil. I want to tell you about a road. When morning came, the storm was gone. The sky outside was washed pale blue, the kind of clean brightness that follows destruction." Lydon sat on the couch, half asleep, the recorder resting beside him. He didn't remember falling asleep, but the recorder's light was on. Red. Recording. He hit stop. The timestamp read 7 hours, 44 minutes, and 1 second. He played the last few seconds. Static, then faintly, like breath against the microphone. "Help me." The voice wasn't the boy's this time. It was his. And somewhere in the background, through the static's soft hum, thunder answered. Chapter 13. The upload finished at 2:07 a.m. The progress bar crawled to 100%, blinked once, and vanished into the pale glow of the monitor. Lydon watched the cursor pulse against the empty text field where the episode description should go. His fingers hovered above the keys, but wouldn't move. Outside, the wind pushed at the siding in long, patient sighs. The storm was gone, but the air still carried that metallic heaviness that lingered after lightning. He could smell it through the cracked window. Ozone, wet earth, asphalt still bleeding rain. He leaned back, rubbed his eyes. "Last one," he whispered. "That's it." The new episode of Static Veil was already queued. The Cursed Road, an audio investigation. 46 minutes, 22 seconds. He didn't remember editing it down to that exact length, but the metadata said he had. He pressed play. His own voice filled the room. Calm, collected, almost detached. "Welcome back to Static Veil. Tonight's story isn't urban legend. It's folklore still living, breathing on the open road. Somewhere along Interstate 44, west of Springfield, there's a mile of pavement the truckers won't talk about unless the weather's bad enough to make them forget." Lydon listened, transfixed. His tone was smooth, confident, almost clinical, but there was an edge underneath. He couldn't tell if it was fear or fatigue. The episode unfolded the way a memory plays when you know it's about to end. He narrated the interviews from the truck stop, the whispers in the static, the storm that followed him out of Missouri. Each clip played seamlessly, perfectly mixed. He'd never managed such clean sound design before. Except he didn't remember recording half of it. At the 30-minute mark, a low hum crept in under his narration. Not a mistake, something purposeful, like a drone too deep for the mic to catch fully. It pulsed at the edge of hearing, matching the rhythm of thunder far away. "What I found," his voice said, "isn't a haunting, it's an echo, sound that never died, bouncing between storms. A boy drowned a century ago, and the sky still remembers his breath." Lydon froze. He didn't write that line. The version of him on the tape continued. Every recording carries a trace of the air it was made in. If that air remembers grief long enough, it becomes something else. You can hear it if you listen long enough. The hum deepened. For a heartbeat, the room seemed to vibrate with it. He reached for the mouse to stop playback, then hesitated. His chest felt tight, like the sound had crawled under his ribs and was pressing outward. "You've heard me talk about the cursed road," the recording said, softer now. "What I didn't tell you is that I never left it." Lydon's breath hitched. He could hear wind in the background of the episode now, whistling through the cracks of a car window, the faint hiss of rain, and underneath, the steady rhythm of tires on wet asphalt. He glanced at his desk recorder. The red light blinked steadily. Recording. Again. He hadn't turned it on. The voice continued. I kept driving. The signs changed. The road folded in on itself, and somewhere between exits 88 and 99, I realized the static wasn't just noise, it was breathing. The hum built until it blurred into a low roar. He stood backing away from the monitor. The room felt smaller, the light flatter, like he was standing inside a photograph. His reflection in the black computer screen lagged again, a heartbeat behind. Then came the whisper. Barely audible, but there. Help me. He stopped breathing. On the recording, his voice didn't pause. It simply layered over the whisper, calm as ever. If you hear that voice, he said, turn off your radio. Don't look in the mirror. Don't stop your car, because the boy doesn't want saving. He just wants someone to hear him drown. Thunder cracked outside, sharp enough to rattle the window. Lydon reached for the mouse again. His hand hovered an inch from it, then froze. From the speakers came the faint squeal of brakes, a car door opening, rain hitting metal, footsteps small, wet, uneven. He whispered, no. The footsteps stopped. Then through the speakers, his own voice again, but quieter, breathless. He's still waiting. The lights flickered. Outside, a single lightning flash turned the yard white. For an instant, he saw the puddles shining at the edge of the driveway, rippling, then gone. The hum stopped. Silence. He leaned forward. The episode timer read 46:22. Playback complete. The file closed itself. He sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. The air around him felt wrong again, heavy, as though the walls were holding their breath. His inbox began to ping. 1, 2, 10 new emails from listeners. He clicked the first one. Loved the new episode. Creepy as hell. But did you mean to include that voice at the end? It sounds like a kid saying something. Couldn't make it out. The next said the same. And the next. By the fifth, someone attached an audio clip. Lydon hesitated, then played it. The outro of his podcast filled the room. The familiar piano cue, the tagline. I'm Lydon Case, and this has been Static Veil. Remember, what we hear isn't always gone. Sometimes it's just waiting for the right frequency. But beneath his voice, faint and distant, was something else. Help me. He shut the laptop. The house went utterly still. Only the rain outside made sound. He sat there, listening, knowing the voice would come again, through the speakers, through the air, through whatever thin membrane still separated his world from the one beneath it. He waited. And when the next low rumble of thunder rolled in from the horizon, it sounded almost like a breath being drawn. Somewhere out on I-44, a trucker would lose his lights before dawn. His radio would die mid-song. The storm would open its throat, and the whisper would thread through the static once more. Help me. And the road would listen.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, stay safe.